Assalamu alaikum, dear students. My name is Waqar Hassan, and today I will discuss disaster management and developing countries. This essay is important, keeping in mind the upcoming CSS, and also it is equally important for PMS exams. So, disaster management and developing countries. Let's decode these terms. I will also try to connect these two terms, and I will try to explain the factors that are responsible for the failure of developing countries to manage disasters effectively. So, first of all, disaster management. Disaster management means capacity or building the capacity to manage a disaster effectively. There are two kinds of disasters: man-made disasters and natural disasters. So, man-made disasters are the result of the activities of mankind on this planet Earth. For example, if we talk about smog, if we talk about the population explosion, if we talk about industrialization, so these are the disasters, or you can say these are the activities, or these are the core reasons why Earth is facing different kind of disaster right now. For example, if we talk about the pandemic, COVID pandemic, if we talk about environmental degradation, if we talk about air pollution, so these are the result of the activities that humans have performed, and they have been performing since the birth of this planet. So disasters are the outcome of our negligence, or it's the outcome of the nature's wrath, and nature inflict disasters on humanity. So the disasters are the outcome of many factors. So developing countries usually fail to manage disaster effectively, and the reason is their failure to come up with the required changes in their administration and infrastructure to manage disaster effectively. Let's discuss few causes why many developing countries fail to manage disasters. So the first factor is the lack of innovation in developing countries. Yes, many developing countries they lack in innovation, and this is one of the core reasons why they fail to manage a disaster. The second core reason is their inability or their incapacity to adopt technology. Use of technology is very much important to predict a disaster. It is through technology that a country can manage a disaster and can minimize the impacts of a disaster. So developing countries they lag behind in this field. Technological revolution in many developing countries is a far cry. Therefore, many developing countries fail to tackle a disaster or to manage a disaster. The third core reason for the failure of developing countries to manage disaster is their poor governance. There is a centralization of power in many developing countries, and wherever there is centralization of power, a country fails to effectively manage resources and effectively distribute resources for managing a disaster. Good governance is a prerequisite for facilitating the public for averting such kind of disasters. Either the disaster is a man-made disaster or a natural disaster, but effective governance can reduce the impact of or the intensity of a disaster. But developing countries, owing to their poor governance, they fail to make it happen or to bring the required kind of, you can say, changes in the infrastructure to avoid a disaster. Poor governance is also one of the reasons that why many developing countries uh, face the consequences of disaster more than that of the developed world. So the number four reason that brings consequences for the developing countries in case of a disaster is illiteracy. When people they fail to gauge the impact of a disaster in many developing countries, why these disasters become so rampant? People think that it's nature's wrath. It might be true in many cases, but humans are also responsible for inviting these disasters to inflict miseries on humanity. But illiteracy is a curse that takes away the ability of a man to think in a sagacious way. In developing countries, people fail to gauge the core reasons behind the occurrence of a disaster, and usually they blame nature instead of blaming their poor governance mechanisms or their governments. So this is one of the reasons that why many developing countries face the curse of disasters. So the next point that is relevant in this regard is economies. Economies play a vital role. Strong economies play a vital role to manage a disaster. It needs resources to make it happen to tackle a disaster. But many developing countries, because of their poor economies, they fail in achieving the goal of disaster management because they don't have enough economic support to build right kind of infrastructure or to provide their public with the facilities with the required aid to avoid disaster or to manage disasters. Yes, so economic development is a prerequisite or it is mandatory for making it happen for a country to manage a disaster in an efficient manner. So many developing countries, owing to their poor economies, have failed to deal with disasters. Even in the case of COVID pandemic, many developing countries suffered a lot, and the reason was nothing else but the economic failure. The next point that is relevant in this regard is in developing countries, there is political instability. Political instability is a curse that never allows governments to implement policies in letter and spirit. Many governments, especially in the developing world, they fail to implement a policy, and when they fail to implement a policy, the desired outcomes are not obtained. Political stability brings stability for a country to implement a policy, and policy implementation is the first step to manage any kind of crisis, be it economic, social, or political. So, this is, you can say, a first step towards managing a disaster, political stability. And if developing countries fail to ensure political, you can say, consensus, they will also fail to manage disaster in future as well. So, political stability plays a vital role in managing a disaster. The next point in this regard, disaster management and developing countries, is the capacity building. Capacity building means investing in people so they can become well aware of the fact that disasters uh, they are not the new norm. Disasters have been uh, inflicting this world since the birth of civilizations. But capacity building makes it happen for a state uh, to avoid a disaster because people play a vital role in managing a disaster, especially in case of disaster. It is the response of people that can assist a government to manage disaster, and yes, it is the negative response of people that can bring chaos in a society. Moreover, capacity building allows a state to produce such individuals who can help a state through their ideas, through their innovation, through their discoveries to manage disasters efficiently. So many developing countries they fail to manage disasters because of the failure to build the capacities of their population. So this is one of the core reasons in this regard. Another cause for the failure of developing countries to manage disasters is their population explosion. Population explosion brings negative consequences for a society. It takes away the ability of a state to manage a disaster. And many developing countries, their population is growing without any kind of, you can say, check and balance and without any planning. So this is the reason why many countries, developing countries, are deprived of this ability to manage disasters effectively. So disaster management in developing countries is a pipe dream because of these factors. Developing countries they lack innovation, they lack in introducing technology, they lack in ensuring good governance. Many people are illiterate in developing countries. Their economies are poor. Political instability adds fuel to the fire. Capacity building is mandatory to avoid a disaster, but many developing countries have failed in ensuring capacity building of their people. And yes, population explosion adds further misery for the developing countries in managing or in averting in managing a disaster. So these are the few causes why many developing countries fail to manage a disaster. And disaster management requires the presence of all these essential elements for a nation to make it happen to manage a disaster. So disaster management in developing countries is a far cry, and these are the core reasons. I hope these are the sufficient points to write an essay on disaster management in developing countries. So stay tuned and do not forget to subscribe. Thank you so much.